Hi, thank you for coming to the Social and Emotional Needs of Gifted and Talented Students presentation that I'm offering today. I want to start the day off with getting to know a little bit about your background regarding your experience with gifted and talented students. So if you'll go to today's meet, you can use the QR code here on the screen or follow the shortened URL and take a moment to answer these questions. What types of GT classes do you teach? And or what type of GT training do you have? And that will just give me a little bit of background as to who we have here. While you are answering those questions, I just want to give you a little bit of a disclaimer that some of the information that I'll be sharing with you today is a little detailed. It's also very near and dear to me. It's a very important topic for me. And I want to make sure that I give you very accurate information. So there may be some things that I read out loud verbatim. But there won't be much of it, and I'll kind of get through that as quickly as possible. So as you're seeing up here on the screen, we have a lot of different backgrounds. Some of us have a lot of experience, some of us don't have very much. I see that some of you are getting your initial training this week. Others of you have already had your initial training, and this is just your update that you have to get annually. I'm really glad to have you here, and I'm thrilled that you chose my session. Just to provide a little bit of background information for you, I've had 15 years in the classroom. I've taught 7th grade through 12th grade. I teach English language arts. I've also taught at Navarro Junior College and at Southwestern and University. I've taught remedial classes and I've taught advanced courses. I do have my master's in curriculum and instruction, so I have my GT endorsement. I got that at UTA. Had some amazing GT professors. And if you'd like to talk about that program, I would welcome that conversation after our session is completed. I started a gifted and talented program at Waxahachie High School. They had no program aside from the AP and dual credit courses, and I'm very excited about what we've done there. If you're interested in an independent study program, something else I could visit with you outside of the session. We at Waxahachie High School service our gifted and talented students mostly through through dual credit and through AP. I teach dual credit British literature. I'm also the English department head. So I want to let you know that there's some significant research that regarding the documentation that, I'm sorry, let me strike that. There is some significant research out there regarding the social and emotional needs of gifted and talented students. A lot of it has to do with the perception that occurs in teachers and family members and peers when children are identified as gifted, and how this perception can impact the students and how it can impact their education. I don't know exactly where you are on your awareness or your concern of the social and emotional needs of the gifted and talented students, so I just want to validate this information with a little bit of research. On the screen here you will see the citations for a lot of different studies that are out there, and I just want to rush through some of this information. I do have this PowerPoint posted so that you can access it if you want to look into some of this in greater detail, or if you email me, I would be glad to share you the information that I found. I actually have a very long document where I've assembled all of this information. So the first one you see up here, the first formal links between giftedness and indicators of mental health came in 1891 from a criminologist named Cesar Lombroso in his book, The Man of Genius. In this book, he puts forward this divergence hypothesis which argued that exceptionally high levels of intelligence are associated with maladjustment and potentially psychopathology. So this is kind of the very first research that I was able to find regarding some social and emotional needs with gifted and talented students. With gifted and talented individuals. We have Hollingworth, who says that young people with IQs greater than 160 are too different from their peers to avoid social isolation. He proposes that there's an ideal range of giftedness, an IQ between 125 and 155, above which there may be problems with poor psychological well-being. It's a subset of gifted and talented who experience poor mental health and social adjustment. The famous study of Lewis Terman in the 1920s, titled The Genetic Studies of Genius, is often seen as the first empirical studies of the attributes, characteristics, and outcomes of gifted individuals. His sample of over 1,500 gifted people, all with the Stanford Binet IQs over 140, indicate that there was no difference between the well-being of these individuals and non-gifted members of the general population. We have Tannenbaum's study, who comes after that. He evaluated adolescents' attitudes towards academic brilliance. Giftedness was not a stigma in itself, because but it became an unacceptable attribute when combined with other traits such as a lack of interest in sports or a greater than average time commitment to schoolwork. Torrance proposed that with an exploration of negative peer sanctions used against highly creative children by groups to keep their most creative and talented members in check. Cummington, Marsh, Rosenberg, Schuler, and Schoenbeck's study shows that robust links between mental health and curricular and extracurricular success. It may be that poor psychological well-being is preventing gifted and talented pupils from fulfilling their potential. Halpern and Luria found strong evidence of negative stereotyping of children labeled as gifted. Patchett and Gautier said that the word gifted comes from, their study is where the word gifted comes from. They say that a set of publicly recognized connotations that instill respect, yet some experience problems in relationships, specifically because they have been labeled gifted. Nail and Evans said that giftedness is inexorably coupled with poor psychological well-being. Walker and Pernew, the gifted group were in fact better adjusted than normal population. So you can see a wide range of information here. Here's a little bit more about the perceptions of gifted and talented students. As early as 1953, Epstein said that teachers' perceptions of students labeled as gifted and talented often correspond to the level of teacher training and gifted education. That's so key, and that's why I'm glad that you're here today. Or that teachers' beliefs regarding diversity could affect the way that students respond to this title. Not surprisingly, according to Nicely, Small, and Furman, teachers with less knowledge of the programs view gifted students more negatively. The research of Copenhaver and McIntyre demonstrated that teachers' perceptions of gifted students differed significantly and could be correlated with two factors: whether teachers had taken courses or workshops on gifted education and the grade level that the teachers taught. Hansen, Felsenson, and Henian found definite and measurable differences between experts and novices, teachers trained and untrained in the area of gifted education. They go on to say that clearly teacher perceptions are colored by their knowledge of gifted programs and their training in the field of gifted education. According to Nail and Evans in 1997, if giftedness is shown not to be associated with psychopathology, it is vital that that adults working with gifted and talented youngsters are encouraged to highlight concerns over the student's psychological well-being, rather than dismissing it as merely being a part of their expected profile. Now listen to this. They said that if adults are led to believe that psychopathology in gifted children is natural or even expected, then they will not see fit to highlight a concern when very able youngsters begin to display signs of mental ill health. So it's really important to understand these social and emotional needs so that we can target areas of concern. Just a little bit more here on the research, and we'll move on to something a little more interesting, although I can tell that some of you like the research here. Guskin, Okolo, and Zimmerman and Ping showed highly favorable views, that gifted students have highly favorable views of themselves. Only a minority reported negative reactions from peers. That students perceived the gifted label as associated with a high status, especially from parents and teachers. Bartel and Reynolds said that gifted girls experienced more positive psychological well-being than gifted boys and had higher self-esteem than gifted males. Loeb and Jay said that better self-confidence and self-concepts for gifted girls was evident as opposed to gifted boys. Kerr et al. Go on to say that gifted adolescents view giftedness as having a positive effect on the self, but a negative or ambiguous effect on others. Giftedness, this was important I found out, giftedness was perceived as an advantage in terms of personal growth and academics, but at the same time was perceived as having strongly negative social implications. Robinson, in his book Gifted, the Two-Faced Label, said that labeling is a social process that can have both positive and negative effects on the balanced student. He says that a majority of students report positive or neutral comfort levels with the label of gifted. Approximately 1 in 6 gifted students indicated extreme discomfort. Hickey and Toth showed that it was a mixed blessing to be labeled as gifting. Manister said that negative stereotypes come from those who know them the least, their classmates in general, not from those who know them the best, like their parents, their teachers, and their close friends. Baker said that gifted boys were found to experience lower levels of depression than gifted girls. Felton and Dye said that most of the students viewed their own ability as something that grows with effort. Moulton says the first 5 positive attributes were internal gratification, unique identity, advanced learning in school, interaction with other gifted students, and special experiences in gifted and talented classes. Stereotyping remained one of the 5 most negative aspects. Another of the negative aspects being peer pressure expectations, expectations of parents, and expectations of teachers. And finally, Cross, Malady, and Miller said that gifted boys were less suicidal than gifted girls. Okay, that was a lot to get through, and I thank you for being patient and bearing with me. But I want to lay a foundation that this is all based in very solid research. So what do we do with this information? I want you to see that gifted students are not a homogeneous group. They are all over the place. I view gifted and talented as a spectrum, and there's students all over that spectrum. Many students are adjusting just fine, and many prepare for college and adulthood just fine. But there is a subgroup that is not preparing themselves, that is not adjusting, and many of these students are dropping out of dropping out of high school, and several of them are depressed and suicidal. I can't reference the study, but I remember reading a study once that showed that 50% of high school dropouts were actually gifted and talented students. So it is an important issue. It's something that I want you to be aware of, and I hope it's something that I can at least inspire an interest in for you. Going back to the today's meet, I've been talking a lot. I would like to bring back in a little bit more interaction. If you'll go back to the same today's meet, I'm just curious, just to poll the group, do you consider yourself gifted and talented? And or did you know kids that were truly gifted but were not in the gifted and talented program? Okay, I'll allow some time for participants to respond, and we can discuss those. I want to give you a little bit about my background. I did go to public high school. I was identified as gifted and talented at the end of 4th grade. I had a lot of different types of programs. I was in a pull-out program for a while. Then we had gifted and talented language arts in junior high, and then 4 years of AP classes while I was in high school. In my personal life, I never quite fit in with the guys. I didn't really speak a guy language. I couldn't speak cars or sports or other guy stuff. So I was kind of ostracized in that way. My outlet, the way that I normalized my weirdness, I guess would say, was through religious extremism. I'm still a man of faith, but I would say that in high school I was quite an offensive Christian. Giant Bible, Christian t-shirts, only Christian music. I would parade through school, and if you cussed in front of me, you had to apologize. Meanwhile, while I had this appearance of being the strongest Christian at my school, I was struggling with depression. I was suicidal my senior year. I had this image of being a strong and happy person, but deep down inside I was struggling with my differences, and it was my senior AP English teacher, I would say, that intervened and saved my life. Post high school, I was still weird, but I didn't have any support. In high school, at least, all of my teachers had to have gone through 30 hours of training, and then I'm thrust out into the real world. I had to re-identify myself, and I've continued to do so throughout my life. So one of the things that I want to focus on is how can we help our young people prepare for facing the real world outside of the trainings that their teachers have. I've given you a handout that has a list of just gifted and talented characteristics. I'd like for you to think of that one gifted student, the one that you can think of, that if there's ever been a gifted kid, it's this kid. And I would like for you to mark all of those as possible. I'll allow for a few minutes. We'll stop and discuss those. On the back of this, you have a blank copy that you can keep for yourself. I frequently turn my class into a bit of a group therapy session when we're talking about gifted and talented students. So I want them to be able to have the opportunity to share and discuss and normalize these feelings. I share my experiences and I ask them to share theirs. One of the traits that gifted and talented students often experience is a level of perfectionism. When I start discussing with my students that perfectionism often equals procrastination because it gives the excuse as to why your work isn't perfect, it's a very enlightening moment for a lot of my students. These expectations are so high, they've had a long history of academic success, and then they reach a point where they can no longer achieve that easily. And at that point, many of them begin to bottom out and start searching for reasons or excuses. This was me. I never learned how to study in high school. I got to college by just breezing through high school, never studying, and then it hit me like a brick wall in college. And I still face these same issues with procrastinations. I have a handout for you. I have several different testimonials. I've surveyed my former students and received their experiences, and I would like for you to take a minute. We're going to jigsaw through these. I would like for you to discuss in your groups, and then we're going to move around and we're going to discuss what we learned by reading these testimonials.